All right, guys, welcome back. We got, I believe this is our monthly support call number 2. And we're going to dig into some things didn't get much. We've been creating some conversation with some of our members as of recently, talking about a few topics that I thought would be helpful for Coach Arian and I to discuss, with the first one being this concept of seeking soreness, seeking physical destruction after workouts, determining the effectiveness of one's workout, or determining the satisfaction of one's workout based on the sensations that they're getting afterwards, and not the sensations of like those post-workout endorphins and like the feeling of accomplishment, but almost like like, am I getting killed during this workout, or am I dying during this workout, and how sore can I be the next day? And if I am sore, then that's a double thumbs up. That was a great workout. And if I'm not sore, then what the hell did I do wrong? Why am I not sore? And so I think this is just this is like a misconception in the fitness community, but it's the societal view of like, if I'm not sore, beat up after my workouts, then I didn't do enough, or it wasn't effective, or I didn't do enough and it's not effective. And so what are your thoughts on that, Arian? I obviously have my 2 cents as well, but I think we can create some conversation around that topic.
Yeah, I think it all kind of stems back to, when we look at everything kind of from a gamification standpoint, where I know a lot of times we look at, for instance, like tracking calories or tracking movement or tracking activity, where the indication that like more is obviously better. Well, if I'm working out really hard, I'm building up my cardiovascular system and I'm burning 400 calories. Well, imagine if I did it twice as long and I went twice as hard and I burned 800 calories. And then thinking about the impact that training session has on maybe what you can eat, or, some of the other decisions, or looking at it like a calculator from that standpoint. I know that personally, right, having gone through any type of training modality, going through playing college football, playing a little bit of pro football, like you going through baseball, like soreness is an obvious like buy-in or an obvious factor that goes with most training. We're physically tearing our muscles down. But I think the trade-off is, at what point are we doing potentially more damage or seeking something that necessarily isn't the best metric for what we're doing? And I think that's where we start to really can, have this dialogue about like what ultimately people should be shooting for. And I think, your fitness level has a big impact, or a big determiner on kind of what your level of soreness ultimately would be. If you aren't doing very much, if you aren't, coming from, really much of a place of training, then by physically breaking your muscles down, it is going to be without a doubt more noticeable kind of following any training session that you're gonna be sore. It's a nature of the beast. And as our muscles become a little bit more resilient, they become stronger, it takes higher and higher amounts of impact to kind of create that same soreness. And I think the easy connection is to draw that, hey, when I first started, I used to be really sore and I've made this much progress. So just immediately connecting the 2 dots and being like, I'm not making progress if I'm not feeling sore. And that's where I think the disconnect from all of this comes from. More times than not, people are just seeking intensity for the sake of like, that's what they feel like is the only measurable, tangible thing that they're measuring. It's how bad do I feel after a workout to determine how much progress I'm making. And I think that's the big misconception. When I think about like, ultimately a lot of our goals, right? We're not doing multiple training sessions. We're not trying to, get ready for a game this upcoming Saturday. We don't have any of those big milestones. It's, I want to live this life to my best ability and I want to get the most out of it so that every day I'm not held back by my fitness. I'm able to do a little bit more. And more times than not, like I feel great. Like I train and the next day I wake up and it's almost imperceivable. Now, it doesn't mean that the session I did was, not effective. I mean, I think we could always look at ourselves and think we can go harder, but at the same time, knowing where you're starting, knowing where you're going, I think is a big factor. And I like using, some of the trackables, some of the measurables that we have access to. So like a Whoop, to determine, what is an appropriate amount of strain or training or, anything that goes along those lines that I could even take on for the day. Because I know we used to always use that mentality where you wake up and you just kind of like shrug it off. You're like, oh, I don't feel great. Let me just see where I'm at today, and then hop into a training session and hope that I magically feel better and not get sick for the remainder of the week. But again, now knowing that, when I wake up, turn off my sleep, turn off my alarm, see where kind of my readiness state is, and then just paying a little bit more mind as to where I am today, like that, I feel like has made substantial progress in just my total quality of life. And, the feeling of like, I don't have to, go ham or, balls to the wall when I am in the gym. And so maybe that's kind of where we can open up this debate. I think that's the big sticking point that a lot of people have is I have a specific goal, and in order for me to get to the goal, I have to work really hard, and I'm willing to work really hard. So the only way for me to measure that is how bad I feel after a training session or following, following a training session in that matter.
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of really good points, and the first point is like understanding what soreness is, and really you hit on this early on, but like soreness is the aftermath of tearing your tissues down. Like when we do fitness training or we do strength training or we do whatever it might be inside the gym space, if we're feeling soreness, whether it's in our arms, upper body, lower body, abdominals, whatever, there was some sort of damage that occurred there prior to during that training session that is leading to that sensation that we're feeling afterwards. So soreness is the aftermath of creating these micro perforations inside of your muscle. And when you think about increasing muscle size, increasing muscle growth, increasing muscle mass, we have to create these micro perforations in our tissue in order for them to rebuild. And they rebuild through rest, they rebuild through overreaching, progressive overload, a lot of the stuff that we see as far as training methodology goes, but then they progress through macronutrient consumption and nutrition and all of these things. But essentially what we're feeling the day after we're doing something, and this is a conversation that I had with one of our members, was when you feel sore, usually the things that lead to us feeling the most sore the next day is an uptick in volume or intensity. And what I mean by uptick is just the change from the norm. And so you also touched on a lot of good points where it's like, hey, there are days where probably more days than not where we don't feel sore after training. And that's a good thing, because ultimately when it comes back to especially our population, it's like we train for functionality, we train for quality of life. And if every single day after we work out, we feel like a Mack truck hit us, like it's not enhancing our functionality, it's not enhancing our quality of life when it's like hard for us to sit to a toilet or bend over to pick up our child. It's like our training is no longer accomplishing the goal of enhancing the functionality of our life, making us feel better, might be making us look better, aesthetically, but it's not making us feel better. And so, in my opinion, we shouldn't seek out being sore after every single training session. I think it's good at the appropriate times, right? Hey, if I look back to yesterday, did I really push my capacity? Did I really push my limits to where I enhanced my volume? Or maybe I pulled a new, 3-rep personal best, or I really pushed myself outside of my comfort zone on one of the benchmarks. Yeah, you're probably going to be feeling some sort of retribution from that, knowing that you exceeded your intensity or you exceeded your volume. And at the end of the day, like, I don't know about you, Aaron, but I kind of like that feeling, right? Because it makes you feel like, man, I really did something yesterday and I feel accomplished today. As long as that feeling is hand in hand with that mentality. If that feeling is not hand in hand with that mentality, then I think we're going down the wrong road when we're, talking about soreness specifically. But I think understanding what soreness is, and then also understanding that like being beat up after workouts or feeling sore is not necessarily a bad or a good thing. It just means that there was some sort of uptick or change in your typical volume or intensity. And we'll use our training methodology, for example, is like usually during our benchmark weeks, we're going to be a little bit more sore because we're pushing our capacity. Or if we're doing, we haven't seen a lot of tempo work, we're increasing our time under tension, which means that we are tearing our tissues a lot more. Usually on those days following the strength work, we are going to feel a little bit more beat up. As of recently, the Behemoth Open, right? When we're doing, hey, we're typically doing 50 to 100 reps of deadlifts, but on one workout, we might be pushing 150 reps of deadlift with loading that is maybe a little bit outside of my capacity or comfort zone. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be feeling something the next day, but it's not an absolute determinant on whether that session was good or bad. It's just understanding the science of why you're sore and why it happened that way. And I think you also mentioned a really good point on mentality around soreness, right? I think our society has pushed us, fitness society has pushed us into the idea of like, hey, I want to kill myself during this training session. I want to feel like I'm dying because I'm expending more calories, I'm expending more energy, which is in turn getting me closer to my goals, which likely revolves around aesthetics or body composition, rarely performance. And so if this workout is just skull crushing, then I know that I'm burning more calories and I'm, getting the job done. And that's not always the case. And you brought up utilizing metrics like the Whoop, which is a really great tool. And I think this is a good pivot to start talking a little bit about the Whoop and how we use the Whoop to determine effectiveness of workouts and training strain and stuff like that. But can we talk a little bit more about, because I'm pretty certain that a lot of our members have the Whoop. And if you guys don't know about the Whoop, this is this little band. It's not a watch, but you'll see it on folks' wrists. Like Coach Braden, he wears it on his arm when he trains. We have a lot of members that wear it too. But the Whoop measures a few things. It measures day strain. It measures quality of sleep, and it measures what else? What am I missing here, Ryan? Day strain, recovery. Yeah, recovery. So those are the three big metrics: sleep, recovery, score, and then basically strain. But yeah, within each one of those, you're looking at heart rate variability, you're looking at resting heart rate, you're looking at a lot of these cool things. I think this is a great opportunity to just like pivot a little bit, talk about how the Whoop fits into this conversation and just like how you like to use it, how I like to use it, how we talk to our members about using it.
Yeah, I had maybe one or two more points. Just kind of, I know we don't want to, beat a dead horse with this, but I think it always comes back down to consistency. And I think this is where most people get into trouble when we start looking at that seeking soreness mentality. It's because I've not been consistent for the past month. So I'm going to get a month's worth of training out today, right? I'm catching up, or I'm making up, or I ate really bad. And so because of that, I'm going to go harder on this, or I'm planning on eating, or I'm doing something. But it's that kind of like Faustian barter where you're trying to outrun something else that you're not making up for. It could be stress, it could be family life, it could be, like nutrition, it could be a bunch of stuff. But it's that idea of like, I train so I can eat and I don't care, right, what health looks like. A lot of times, you touched on goals specifically, right? People seek out that Instagram body, that like high level model body. I don't know if you follow any of those, like, same photographers or same models who do like same day photo shoot where like greased up in the perfect angle and they're jacked, like shredded to the nine. And then it's like 9 a.m. later that day and they look like a normal person, right? Most of that is false. Like a lot of that is lighting and camera and everything else. But most importantly, it's not ideal health, right? When we're seeking, right, the optimal health, that doesn't necessarily match with what ideal, standards are for today's society. And that's the thing that I think most people kind of can't reconcile. I've never looked like that, but I want to look like that. And most of these are just, I almost call them, I've heard a bunch of people refer to it, but like hustle porn or like inspiration porn, like the David Goggins or the Jocko Willink, or like all of those other people who literally just talk about willpower and mindset and hard work and determination and all of these like very admirable traits. But then they link that to basically, if you're not like so tired that you can't function anymore, then you're not doing it. Well, that's different if your goal is to literally be in the absolute worst case scenario and have to be fighting for your life like a Navy SEAL or some of these other like very specific applications in which fitness is the difference between life and death. Like we're not stepping into that. We're not getting ourselves ready for that. We're trying to essentially, right, be proud of our bodies when we take our shirts off, right? And if that's the case, right, you don't have to seek, right, that ultimate, that highest. And again, I think it's just that more is better mentality that we can break down. Last thing I want to take, and then I'll pivot to the Whoop. But one of the things that we have to remember is our body is amazingly adaptive. And that kind of leads back into how we can use the Whoop to start to understand this. But if you think about it, right, most of us look at nutrition, health, fitness, a lot of these pieces like a calculator where it's calories in, calories out, exercise, all these other pieces. The thing that makes it tough is your body adapts to it, right? The amount of energy and effort it took to pull what your old one rep max or 3 rep max deadlift was today is less because I've adapted and I'm stronger and I'm moving in the right direction. My favorite analogy, and I heard this recently, and I kind of just put it together, but is think about it from the standpoint of an astronaut, right? We interact every single day on a daily basis with gravity, and we don't even pay attention to that. But our bodies, as a response to this, right, have created these very dense skeletons and very dense muscular systems so that we can stand upright and we can move and we can do everything else. Astronauts have learned that when you go into orbit for any amount of time, but typically over a 5 or 7 day time period, if they aren't lifting strenuously, talking about not like high repetition, like heavy, like dense lifting, that their bodies automatically start shedding their skeleton. They literally have potentially up to 1% skeletal loss, which is like on par with what you see at like late stage osteoporosis in a short, like a 2-week time frame. Like you have people who are on the some of these space stations, and if they're not carving out 2 hours every day, whether they want to or not, because there's zero gravity being interacted with our body, then literally your bones start to just erode away. They go, we don't need this, we're done with it. And so when you take that same consistency approach and you layer it on top of what we're trying to do at the gym, I can bust my butt as hard as I can, as hard as possible, destroy my body, do all those micro perforations, try to create as much strain, as much stress, lift all of this weight. But if I'm so sore the next day that I can't come back for a week, like how effective is that really, right? If in reality, I want to be able to train tomorrow, right? And the next day and continue to build work. What's more effective, right? Having 1 3-hour session once a week or having 3 10 30-minute sessions over the course of, a week, right? My argument would be, right, breaking it up and allowing you to do more in a way that also teaches your body how to adapt and how to learn to it. So before I move on, I don't know if you have anything to add to.
Yeah, that last point that you hit on where it's like, what's more effective, a 3-hour vigorous training session or something that is, less vigorous, but more consistent throughout the day. I think that's such a vital point to understand is, and there was some, I don't know if anybody follows like Andrew Huberman right now, but he's a research scientist at Stanford, I believe, but he just put some stuff out basically saying that 1 hour of vigorous training a day is completely negated by, a 5 to 8 hour of consistent inactivity or sitting. And so what he's actually suggesting is, instead of the 1 hour of vigorous training a day, if you take 3 to 4 10-minute walks and you balance your sitting to standing like 50-50, you're going to see more bang for your buck than just getting in the gym and hammering it hard for a 60-minute time frame, because it comes back to this 23-to-1 ratio. And this is stuff that we talk to our members about a lot, but it's like what's going to have a greater effect on you getting to your end goal, whether that is sustainability or whether it's body composition, whatever it might be. It's like the 1 hour you spend inside of the gym or the 23 hours you spend away from it. It's like, well, it's clearly the 23 hours.
Yeah,
so I think
absolutely. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I don't know if you had anything to follow up with that. Otherwise, I wanted to chat a little bit about the Whoop since we brought that up.
Yeah, no, so Whoop is awesome. I will say I'm a little underwhelmed with the 4.0 version. I think they've made some updates and they've lost some functionality that I think they're slowly building back in with updates. But in terms of wearables and trackables, like there's no better standard. And so using or having used things like, the Fitbit and, some of the other just general metric things that essentially just track like oscillations. So you're really only looking at steps. It's kind of irrelevant when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, right? If Asia, you got 10,000 steps today, but you ran up a hill, and I got 10,000 steps today, and I, sat at a desk and tapped my foot on the floor, right? I would imagine that there's a pretty big difference between the amount of impact, your 10,000 steps and the amount of impact my 10,000 steps got me. And so when you start pairing that into, the cool thing is it doesn't measure your daily readiness, it calculates it, and it's looking at perceivable things that tell it how much strain that you are able to take on for the day. And it does that through essentially utilizing some baseline metrics. Now, like anything else, there's a a general bell curve that it's going to put on. So there are times where people fall outside of this. But the cool thing is it's looking at, right, the emotional, the intangible, the things that are really hard to track, and it's putting quantifiable numbers on there. So it's looking at your resting heart rate, but it's not just looking at it today, it's comparing it to what your baseline is, right? It's taking your, and again, I'm not 100% sure how it does this, but it takes your oxygen saturation and it takes your resting heart rate, and it takes your core body temperature, but it layers all of these on top of the amount of time that you're putting into the bed for sleep, and it's calculating your recovery, right? And on top of that, once it calculates that, it uses a number called, or a metric called heart rate variability, which again is one of those things where simplistically, and Asia, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but simplistically, if you looked at the pace of your heartbeat, right, just at rest, most people think about a heart like a metronome, where it's very consistent. And if you sweat or you move a little bit, it gets a little bit faster, but it stays very metronomically on par, which is false, right? If you looked at it over the course of like, nanoseconds, or like very, 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 very short time frames, right, there are slight variations in the tempo of your beat, especially at rest. And that variation has a inverse, so opposite relationship with how prepared your heart is to take on stress for the day. And so when you think about it, the most stable heart rate would be right, that the flat line. That's what we're trying to avoid. So the more metronomic your heartbeat is, the fewer variations that you have on a day-to-day basis, the lower your heart rate variability score is, and arguably the less apt you are to take on stress for the day. And so the cool thing is, again, it's all relative to you. Because again, looking at all of the, we have a really cool Behemoth Facebook group, or Behemoth Whoop group, where we can kind of jump in and see kind of where everybody's day strain is, where everybody's recovery, where their heart rate variability. But like, for instance, like looking at Leah, like consistently in the high, like, or in the low 110, 115, 120, kind of consistently is usually where her heart rate variability stands. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's fitter. Again, not using that more is better, but like that's her kind of baseline, right? Mine tends to fall more in the 40 to kind of 60 realm, right? If I'm closer to 60, tells me that I'm a little bit more apt for strain. I have a green, a more easily perceivable, like, yeah, all systems are go, like go for it today. As it starts to make its way to 40, sometimes that's, hey, if I had a really hard training session the day before and I have a yellow, like that's a good indication that like, hey, you probably shouldn't hit it as hard today, right? We're going to start pushing ourselves in, or vice versa. If I did nothing yesterday and I pull a yellow, a lot of times it's an indication that there's something else going on, whether it's, hey, I didn't get a great night's sleep, or, hey, I might be starting to kind of move my way to getting sick. But I know, Asia, you saw some stuff right around the start of the pandemic where they're using it to actually kind of like preemptively catch people getting COVID.
Yeah. 1,000-foot overview for those of you guys that are listening that don't really know what a Whoop is. It's a wearable we showed you earlier, but it basically projects you some of the information that Arian was telling. Kind of got into some really detailed stuff as far as heart rate variability and whatnot. But for the most part, it's giving you 3 different numbers a day. It's giving you your sleep, right? How quality your sleep was. It's giving you your strain projection for the day. So it's giving you a red, yellow, or a green, giving you the opportunity, the projected, what kind of strain can you take on for the day? How recovered and ready are you to take on strain for the day? Obviously, red is like, oh, watch out. Yellow is like, yeah, you want to be mindful. And green is like, get after it. And then it is, it's basically showing you it's showing you your strain, right? How you can take on strain. And the cool thing about the Whoop that I really like is not everybody is a measurable kind of person, but it's really hard to measure things like how hard was that training session, or how does physiological stress, physical or mental, or physiological, like I said, how does it affect us? How quality was my night of sleep before? I got into bed at this time, I got 8 hours of sleep. Isn't that quality? Well, let's take a look at a few things. And they're using these equations and these metrics to really project, and measure a lot of these things that are unmeasurable unless we have these tools. A few things that I really like about the Whoop is the accuracy of it. So it's been compared against the gold standard sleep study out there. In the gold standard sleep study, I forget the name of it, but it basically has rated Whoop very accurate in comparison to it. So we know that if we're wearing this Whoop based on the metrics that they're taking on in, and the equations that they're spitting out to us, it's giving us a relatively accurate projection of how quality our sleep was the night before. And when we look at the approach we take at Behemoth, the lifestyle-based fitness approach, you have to look outside of the gym walls. And sleep, and Arian could probably agree with me, anybody that knows anything about fitness and health and longevity, sleep is like 1 and 1A when it comes to nutrition and exercise. And oftentimes, like, we would put sleep and nutrition higher on the totem pole than we would exercise. And what we're starting to find is people that have whoops, and I think they've actually done a research study on this, but people that have whoops, it actually increases their sleep habits. It betters their sleep habits by just being more informed on sleep in general. This little thing right here projects a lot of really cool information around your sleep, not just sleep consistency, but REM sleep versus deep sleep versus wakefulness, wake times, and things of that sort, to where it's actually improving people's sleep quality. So if you're somebody who's like, man, I have no habits, no healthy habits around my, pre-sleep routine or just sleep in general, and it's like just getting one of these tools alone is going to improve that based on the research that they found. And then the other really cool metric that I love about it is it's showing you how strenuous stress is throughout the day. And so it's not just something that shows you your training stress, right? When we're taking on workouts at the gym, obviously there's more strain behind our longer aerobic capacity pieces versus maybe our short sprint EMOM style stuff versus our strength stuff. But it's also showing you like how vigorous yard work is, or how vigorous your jujitsu class is, or how vigorous just like, that very stressful presentation that you had at work was if you're wearing a whoop, because it measures and it shows you it shows you stress, and stress can be physical, it can be physiological. And I think this kind of circles back and ties into our conversation on like seeking a really, really hard and like strenuous workout. When you're wearing your whoop, you can see how strenuous or not strenuous it is. But just because that it's strenuous or not strenuous doesn't mean that it was an effective session or not. This whoop does not pick up like central nervous system stress. So if you're doing if we're doing tempo strength work and our heart rate isn't driving up super high, but we are taxing our tissues, our connective tissues, stuff like that, the whoop is not going to measure a very high strain. But if we are jumping our heart rate up to a relative max of our max heart rate for a good, long, consistent worth of time, that's going to give us a much higher strain, but that might likely not be as hard perception wise to us as that 5x5, split squat set at a 5-second tempo. And so it's great in the sense of giving us measurables and information, but it starts giving us more concrete ways to start taking a look at some of this data that we didn't necessarily have the opportunity to look at, that is going to incur and determine, right, how we should approach the day or how we should approach our workout. And like Arian was saying, there's often times where some of our members that have whoops, when they come in for a training day and they tell us that they're not feeling great, the first question we ask them is like, what was your whoop score, or what was your whoop recovery? They're like, it was red. It's like, yeah, it's clear. But to Arian's point, whoop picked up a lot of popularity amongst professional sports. This was originally made for professional athletes, because when we're looking at finding an accurate tool to take their performance up 1 or 2%, like, this is why they created it. But I think they have a bigger following for just general population or weekend warrior athletes. But where they gained a lot of their popularity is over the COVID period. They had a few golfers who was wearing the whoop, and based on where their respiration rate was, where their recovery score was, where their HRV, their resting heart rate during sleep was, it was actually projecting like whether they had the COVID virus or not 3 to 4 to 5 days before they actually tested positive for it, which was remarkable. And I think that's what caught them a lot of popularity, not just with, the PGA Tour, but I think they're the official wearable for the NFL, the MLB, the NBA, like literally everybody out there, CrossFit, just because it's such a great tool to start tracking those measurables that are so hard to track tangibly unless you have a tool like this. So, I mean, it's frankly like pennies on the dollar when it comes to your monthly expenditure to do it. Plus, we are able to offer discount through Team Behemoth, but you don't actually pay for the hardware. You just pay for like a monthly subscription. And if you're somebody who likes the measurables, you like to look at the data, like there's nothing out there that's going to compete with this, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, I mean, I couldn't hit this actually goes back to our point about chasing stress. Like the workouts that feel awful, like the ones that you've done where you're like, okay, that's the hardest I've gone in a long time. And then when you go check kind of the relative strain, when you look at it compared to like what you think and what you felt, is so much lower, especially when we get into some of those sprint realms. And I'm sure, you know, you can recall, you know, some of the workouts where you're like, at least when you first got it, where it's like, damn, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. So Asia hit some really good points on it. The score, the relative day strain is pulled off of a scale of 21. And what that represents is 21 being essentially what would be 24 consistent hours of hard, strenuous activity. And so as they were building this and building a lot of the functionality and everything, again, just listening to the team through some podcasts and the interviews that they did early on, they took like a bunch of Navy SEALs and dropped them out of a helicopter and had them swim 5 miles to shore and then participate in a 100-mile hike. And that was what they determined a 21 score would be. So when you think about like the absolute hardest possible thing that you could possibly do, that would be a 21. Now, I know a lot of times when you're on the assault bike, it feels like you're heading towards like, this is the absolute hardest thing I've ever done. But again, it's a lot of it is related to kind of how long you're holding your heart rate into that realm. And when we build like a better endurance, better aerobic, better, you know, circulatory system, more times than not, the heart works less hard, right? It's easier for it to pump blood through. And so again, it's one of those things where some of these short duration workouts where you crush it and you're like, man, that was really hard. Let me go check my score. And it's like 5.7. Like, what the heck? Versus some of the days where it's a longer session and it's, you know, in the mid-teens, high teens. But that was definitely something eye-opening for me into perceivably like how much stress like you're taking on for some of these workouts.
Yeah, those are all great points. Coming back to just such a great wearable to be able to give you some more, you know, metrics and some more data to take it in. And like everybody that's a part of our Behemoth Gym community, like you guys obviously prioritize your health, your fitness, your wellness. So you guys are taking these things seriously. I think this is one of the great tools that you can add to your arsenal. And, you know, for someone like myself and Leah, I'm not a big wearable kind of person. And this is something that I didn't think that I would get used to. And like, we're a few years in,
Yeah.
it's like, it's a no brainer. I mean, I dictate my training sessions and how I go about my day's events based off of what my Whoop is showing me. But my favorite piece of it is the sleep data, right? Just helping me build more of a consistent sleep routine, knowing where I'm lacking, knowing where I need to add, knowing where my sleep debt is so I can catch up on certain things. Because as we know, sleep is high on the totem pole, super, super important. We don't necessarily get better and gain progress towards our goals doing the things that we think in the kitchen, in the gym. It's recovering from doing those things. So I think that will wrap up our session, our Q&A, or our I guess conversation, shall it be. What I will do is I will actually drop our Team Behemoth Whoop link in the comments when I post this to Facebook. And as always, we will do a monthly support call. Excuse the dogs, guys. We'll do a monthly support call on the last Thursday of every month at 3:30 p.m. If you guys have any questions, any topics of discussion, feel free to drop them our way at any time. Otherwise, Ari and I will create some conversation about things that have come up during class or conversations with members to hopefully pique your interest and drop some knowledgeable nuggets your way. Appreciate it, Arian. See you around.